As a toddler, there seems to be a simple glee in the sound of percussion. Sitting on a kitchen floor amidst an array of steel pots, bing, bang, boom. Perhaps this affinity is developed as we lay in our mother's room for 9 months, listening to the beat of her heart. However, I will never forget the sound of cold, hard steel clanging behind me as the prison door slammed shut behind me. I was invited to partake upon a 30-day pilot project at a women's correctional facility. The primary component was to use horses as a modality to assist in their rehabilitation and possible eligibility for parole. Each day I entered into the facility, that hollow clang rang my inner being to the core. Besides using horses, there was also an indigenous element that was incorporated, and it was called the talking stick. We would sit in a circle facing each other, and as tradition states, whoever holds the stick was to ensure their voice was being heard without interruption. And as each woman spoke, I listened very closely to their stories, their fears, their regrets, and their hopes. Out in the paddock, as each one attempted to connect with a horse, I would watch very intensely. I had to explain that horses are a prey animal and they don't speak our language, so they need to read our body language. Our womanly wiles and soft, sweet words may say one thing, but our eyes and actions and intentions don't match. And a horse won't trust us, so we must learn to be honest. By day 30, 20 women saddled up their horse that they had bonded with, and we rode out of the confines of the correctional facility and onto thousands of acres of rolling prairie. And some had urged the horses into this wild gallop, and I watched with the sun on their faces and their hair whipping in the wind. At the end of our allotted time, we headed back, and the expression on their faces was of deep peace and this new discovered freedom that I just envied. On my 6 hour drive back home, I was reflecting on this experience and I thought, how am I any different? How many times have I lied to others and myself saying I was fine when I was suffering inside? How often did I punish myself with hateful dialogue over life lessons and poor choices? How many years have I imprisoned myself with limiting beliefs and just thinking I wasn't good enough? I too had lost my self worth and I was even fearing for my soul. A couple years later, I took up a pilgrimage to go to the peak of Montserrat in Catalana Mountains of Spain. The climb was demanding and my lungs and muscles burned, but when I finally stood on the top and I looked upon that stunning landscape and the city of Barcelona and out to the horizon where the Mediterranean Sea touched, I fell to my knees in tears, begging the heavens for forgiveness, and I tried to catch my breath. And in that moment of silence, this inner voice spoke and said, "You've always been forgiven, but it's you who must forgive yourself." The next morning, I arranged to hire an Andalusian horse to ride on the shores of the Mediterranean and into the waters, a rebirth of sorts. The waves were very choppy as they washed over me and the horse, and I had to quickly turn us back towards the safety of the sandy beach. Then I urged that big, powerful steed into a gallop, and now the sun was on my face and the wind was whipping through my hair, and I connected to that same peaceful euphoria. I was released from my imprisonment. It is said that the finest swords have been through a lot of heat and pounding to become the finest, and temperance is not intended to destroy you, but to make you your best. If you take a billet of steel and pound it out and make a horseshoe, it's worth $12. That same billet, pounded into tiny little watch springs, is worth $300,000. If that billet is pounded and folded 1,000 times, forged in fire, it can become as worthy as a Botang saber, worth 7 million. So we're really not that much difference from steel. We come from raw beginnings with limited possibilities, and we allow others to define who we are when we don't know our full potential. When life seems to pound its lessons upon us, rather than succumbing to this woe is me thinking, we should be embracing our temperance as a blessing. Our self worth should be welcomed with courage and welded in kindness.